You think you can just ignore this? These are the terms. Sign them, now.
If you can find one mistake in this contract, I'll marry you. Marcus Moretti said it on the steps outside his own tower on a cold October morning, and the whole street went quiet. He was 36 years old, head of the most feared family in New York, a man whose name people in this city lowered their voices to say, and the woman standing in front of him had slept in a shelter for the past 3 years. Camila Vance was 27. Her coat was too thin for the weather. Her backpack held everything she owned. 2 minutes earlier, she'd pushed past his bodyguards, planted herself in his path, and said 3 words that made the entire block laugh out loud. "Marry me." Somebody said she was crazy, but Marcus didn't laugh. He reached inside his coat, pulled out a leather folder, and held it out to her. 14 of the best attorneys in this country reviewed this. I translated it into Italian myself. He was smiling when he said it. He was still smiling when she sat down on those marble steps in her worn-out coat and opened it. 3 minutes later, Camila Vance stood up, walked over to the most powerful man in New York, leaned close to his ear, and said 19 words. Nobody else heard them, but everybody saw his face change. He wasn't smiling anymore. He waved his men back, and then he asked her a question nobody expected. "Now before we go on, do me a favor, hit that like button, share this with someone who needs to hear it tonight, and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Because those 19 words are about to bring down an empire that stood for 60 years. Now let's go back to that cold morning outside Moretti Tower, and find out exactly what a homeless woman saw that 14 lawyers missed. Who are you?" The question fell upon the stone steps, and no one dared to breathe. Camila Vance stood straight, both hands still holding the leather-bound file, and she answered in a voice clear enough for the entire line of people behind her to hear. Camila Vance. Nothing more. But behind Marcus, 5 paces away, the man holding a black leather document case suddenly dropped it onto the stone. The sound was small, but in that silence, it cracked like a gunshot. Marcus turned his head. Adrian Vale was bending down to retrieve it, and when he straightened, his face had already returned to normal, his smile restored to its proper place. But Marcus had seen what came before. It wasn't discomfort. It wasn't irritation at being interrupted. It was fear. "My apologies." My hand slipped. Adrian climbed 1 step and placed himself between Marcus and the woman, his voice gentle, as though he were speaking to a lost child. "Sir, she's talking nonsense. This contract has been reviewed by 14 attorneys from 4 different Manhattan law firms, for a combined total of more than 2,000 hours. We're already 15 minutes late. Let me call someone to escort her away." He reached for the file. Camila didn't give it to him. She took half a step back, opened it to the final page, and this time, she didn't whisper. She spoke aloud. "Article 22, the language clause. It's on page 41, the 9th line from the bottom." She raised her head and looked directly at Adrian. "The exact wording is this: in the event of any conflict between the 2 versions, the Italian version shall have legal force." She allowed those words to remain in the silence for 3 seconds. "Your 14 attorneys read the English version. They signed the English version, but the English version doesn't bind anyone. It's merely a reference copy. 2,000 hours. And they've just conducted due diligence on a piece of paper with no legal value." A murmur moved along the steps. One of the attorneys standing above them came down 2 stairs and hurriedly flipped through the documents in his hands. Marcus saw him stop at a page, read it, then look up without saying a word. Adrian smiled. "That isn't an error. It's an intentional provision. This family began in Palermo. Mr. Salvatore wanted the succession document written in the language of his father. It's tradition, not a mistake. I acknowledge that you can read Italian, but you don't understand what it means." "I know it isn't a mistake," Camila said. "I never said it was. It's the door. The error is behind that door, and I've already whispered it into Mr. Moretti's ear." Marcus still hadn't said a word. He looked at Adrian, then at the woman, then down at the file in her hands, and he remembered the exact 19 words she had spoken close to his ear 3 minutes earlier, each one in the Italian he himself had chosen for the translation of this document. Article 9, Section 3, Erede Legittimo. You aren't your own heir. "Say it again," Marcus said. Adrian turned sharply toward him. "Sir." I told her to say it again. Camila turned back to the middle of the file, found the correct page, and read, "The English version, Article 9, Section 3, control of all Moretti holdings shall be transferred to the successor designated by the current head." She turned to the corresponding page. The Italian version of the same provision doesn't use the words designated successor. It uses erede legittimo, the lawful heir by blood. She looked up. "You designated yourself, but you aren't the son of the man who just died. You're the son of the man who died 4 years ago, and the Italian version doesn't care who you are within the company. It cares only about blood. You have no children. You've never married. Under the document you translated with your own hands and are preparing to sign 15 minutes from now, you aren't your own heir." Someone in the crowd let out a faint sound. The attorney standing above them had found the page, and his face had gone deathly pale. "Absurd," Adrian said, and for the first time, his voice rose slightly higher than necessary. "In archaic legal language, erede legittimo can be interpreted more broadly as a rightful successor. It doesn't necessarily mean a blood relative." She's translating from a dictionary. "Then you've just admitted that the most important document in this family was written using a term that can be interpreted in 2 different ways." Camila closed the file. "If you truly believe that, then go ahead and let him sign it. I have nothing to lose. I've been sleeping on the streets for 3 years, sir. You, on the other hand, have a great deal to lose in the next 15 minutes. Adrian opened his mouth, but no words came out. Marcus stepped forward. He didn't look at Adrian, the attorneys, or the 24 raised phones. He removed his coat and draped it over the shoulders of the woman standing before him. The entire staircase went deathly still. There wasn't a person on that street who failed to understand the meaning of what had just happened. In Marcus Moretti's world, a man didn't place his coat around a stranger. He did it only for someone he had placed under his protection, and anyone who touched that person was touching him. Nico Ferraro, standing beside the car, gave a slight nod and motioned for the 2 bodyguards to step back. "Cancel the signing," Marcus said. "Sir, 14 attorneys are waiting on the 45th floor, along with 3 board members and a notary. We can't." "You heard what I said." Marcus still didn't turn around. "Cancel everything. Send them home. No one signs anything today, tomorrow, or at any time this week." He looked at Camila, and his voice dropped until only the 2 of them could hear. "You're getting into the car with me." Camila didn't move. "I need to know one thing first. Say it. If I get into that car, will I be allowed to get out?" Marcus looked at her for a very long time. Then he answered with exactly 3 words, and it was the first time that morning he had spoken with complete honesty. "I don't know." She got into the car, and when the door closed, Adrian Vale stood alone on the stone steps, bending down to retrieve the pen that had fallen from his hand for the 2nd time that morning. The car left the financial district and slowed amid the tide of people moving through the city at noon. Marcus asked nothing for the first 10 minutes. He sat across from her, his hands resting on his knees, studying her as if she were a contract whose dangerous clause he had yet to find. "No one simply knows about a provision buried on page 41, he finally said. "You read it for the first time this morning. 3 minutes. So what did you already know?" Camila slipped his coat from her shoulders, folded it, and placed it on the seat beside her. "I knew my father." Marcus waited. "Thomas Vance." She spoke the name slowly, like someone setting down on a table something she had carried for a very long time. "He drafted contracts for a port corporation in Red Hook, 19 years. He wasn't a trial lawyer, and never set foot in a courtroom. He just sat and read words. There was something he used to tell me. People don't lose in court. They lose in the clause no one bothers to read." She looked out through the window. "I went straight from college to Columbia Law School when I was 21. I finished at the top of my contracts class both semesters. My father never attended a single school event, but every night, before he allowed me to do anything else, he made me read the language clauses aloud. He said that was where people hid the knife." Marcus said nothing, but he was sitting a little straighter now. 4 years ago, on a night in June, I came home and found my father standing over the kitchen sink. He was burning papers. He didn't tear them up or feed them into a shredder. He burned them 1 page at a time in the sink, then turned on the faucet and let the ashes wash down the drain." She paused. "He didn't explain. He said only one thing to me, and I remember every word exactly as he spoke it. If anyone asks you about my work, you tell them you know nothing. That isn't a lie. That's survival." The car stopped at an intersection. Marcus asked quietly. What happened 3 weeks later? Camila turned to look at him. You already know. I want to hear you say it. 3 weeks later, my father was driving home at 10 o'clock at night on Interstate 278. The police recorded it as a single vehicle accident. There were no cameras along that stretch. No witnesses. The case was closed in 11 days. Her voice remained even, never rising once, and that was what made the story feel heavier. I was 23. I started asking questions. I asked people where he worked. I asked the partner company. I filed requests for copies of contracts he had signed. I thought I was doing it the right way. I was a law student. I thought I understood the law. Marcus asked. Then what did they do to you? 6 months later, a case file appeared. It contained confidential client documents found in my locker at school, system access logs showing my username during hours when I wasn't there, and 2 forensic signatures stating that I had altered the dates on a document. She gave the faintest shrug. I was charged with falsifying records. My court-appointed attorney advised me to plead guilty to the lesser charge, so I wouldn't go to prison. I did. It was the greatest mistake of my life. Why? Because Columbia expelled me 2 weeks later. And because when you have a conviction like that on your record, the New York State Character and Fitness Committee will rule against you. Permanently. I wasn't disbarred, Mr. Moretti. I never had a license for them to take away. They simply closed the door before I ever had the chance to step through it. The car turned onto a quieter street. Marcus watched her for a long moment before asking, What about your family? My mother was diagnosed 6 months later. She worked 2 part-time jobs, and neither one provided insurance. We sold the house to pay for the first round of treatment. She died before we finished paying for the second. Camila laced her fingers together. My brother's name is Sam. He was 9 years old then. I had a criminal record, no job, and no permanent address, so Child Protective Services placed him in foster care. I wasn't considered fit to contest it. I was only considered fit enough to request visitation twice a month. Marcus fell silent. Outside, a car horn sounded, then faded away. I've been living in shelters for the past 3 years, she said. I'm not telling you that so you'll pity me. I'm telling you because it has everything to do with why I was standing in front of your building this morning. She reached into her backpack and took out a printed sheet of paper folded into quarters, its creases worn thin. The public library has free computers and access to public corporate filing databases. For 3 years, 1 day every week, I read everything bearing the name Moretti Holdings that had been filed with the state. I wasn't looking for you. I was looking for my father's handwriting. She unfolded the paper and laid it on the seat between them. 3 weeks ago I found it. The registration of a succession instrument filed 6 years ago. At the bottom of the page was a review note from the drafter. 2 handwritten sentences with no signature. For the first time, her voice turned hoarse. I know that handwriting. I grew up with it taped to our refrigerator. Marcus picked up the paper. He read it, then read it a second time. Your father worked for a port corporation, he said slowly. Not for me. That's right. Camila looked directly into his eyes. So why is the handwriting of a man who drafted port contracts at the bottom of the Moretti family succession instrument, sir? That was the question I brought to those steps this morning. I have no money to hire an attorney, no standing to file a petition, and no one in this city is willing to listen to a woman who sleeps in a shelter. I had only one way left to ask you that question. I had to stand in your path somewhere with 24 cameras watching. The car came to a stop. Marcus folded the paper, slipped it into the inside pocket of his suit jacket, and spoke to the driver without taking his eyes off her. Back to the building. Call Nico up to the 45th floor, and tell him to find me 2 experts in Italian law. Neither of them can have worked for this family for so much as a single day. Nico Ferraro needed 40 minutes to find 2 people. The first was a retired professor of comparative law in Boston, who had served as an advisor to the Italian consulate for 11 years. The second was a sworn legal translator in Chicago, who specialized in inheritance documents written in archaic notarial language. Nico thoroughly vetted them both before making the call. Neither of them had ever received a single dollar from any entity bearing the Moretti name. Marcus placed the contract on the long table on the 45th floor and spoke to Camila without looking at her. Sit here. You're not to say a single word until I ask you a question. He turned on the speakerphone. I don't trust you. I trust people who don't know you. Camila sat down and folded her hands on the table. Adrian Vale entered 3 minutes later carrying his document case, and he took a seat at the opposite end of the table, with the expression of a man arriving for a routine meeting. "I sent the 14 attorneys home," he said. They asked why. "I told them you wanted to conduct one final review. No one suspected anything." "Good," Marcus said. The first call connected. Marcus didn't identify himself. He simply read the document number and requested an independent comparison. An encrypted scan was sent, and for the next 20 minutes, the voice of the professor in Boston filled the room, slow and measured as he examined each provision in turn. Article 17 matched. Article 18 matched. Article 21 matched. Then he stopped. "Your Article 22 is a standard language priority provision. It says the Italian version prevails in the event of a conflict. There's nothing unusual about that by itself. What's unusual is that there is, in fact, a conflict." Marcus's voice didn't change. "Where?" "Article 9, Section 3. The English version uses the phrase designated successor. The Italian version uses erede legittimo." The professor paused. In Italian notarial language, that term has a precise meaning. It means a legally recognized heir by blood. It doesn't include an appointed successor. If the two versions conflict, and Article 22 says the Italian version prevails, then this instrument transfers authority according to bloodline, not according to the wishes of the person signing it. Adrian opened his document case. "Professor, if I may, in Sicilian wills from the last century, erede legittimo was still used more broadly to mean the rightful successor. I'm familiar with that usage," the voice from the speaker replied. "It disappeared from notarial practice in the 60s. If the person who drafted this document had intended the broader meaning, they would have used successor designato. That phrase exists. It's unambiguous. No one chooses erede legittimo without knowing exactly what they're choosing." Marcus ended the call and dialed the second number. The translator in Chicago listened to the request, remained silent for 4 minutes while reading, then asked a single question. "Who translated this?" "I did," Marcus said. "Then did you ever study legal Italian?" "My grandmother taught me." "That explains why you missed this." There was no mockery in the translator's voice. The everyday meaning and the notarial meaning of that phrase are different. Someone who speaks Italian at home would understand it as a lawful heir. A notarial drafter would understand it as an heir by blood, and an Italian court would interpret it in the second sense. He paused. "There's one more thing I need to tell you. The file you sent me contains embedded metadata. Would you like to hear it?" Marcus said yes. "This file was last saved 11 days ago, at 2:17 in the morning." No one in the room moved. Nico spoke first. "That's impossible. 14 attorneys signed the due diligence record 19 days ago. I have the original. I carried it down to the records room myself." Marcus turned toward Camila for the first time since entering the room. "Which version did you read this morning?" "The one in your hands," she answered. "The one you intended to sign today. Then there are 2 Italian versions." He spoke the words very slowly. "One that 14 attorneys read and approved, and another that was altered at 2:17 in the morning, 8 days after they signed, then bound in leather and placed in my hands for my signature." Nico was already on his feet. "I'll send someone down to the records room immediately. There's no need to rush." Adrian closed his document case, and his voice remained as calm as it had been when he first entered the room. "Revising a translation after due diligence is perfectly normal, sir. Spelling corrections, punctuation adjustments, standardizing the capitalization of proper names. I've approved dozens of technical revisions like that over the past 4 years, and you've never once had to concern yourself with them. Did you approve this one?" "I approve all of them." "Then show me the revision log." Adrian nodded, opened his tablet, worked for a moment, then looked up with an expression of mild regret. "The log retains routine activity for only 30 days, but the specific record of the session at 2:17 that morning isn't appearing. Our cloud storage system underwent maintenance that week. I'll ask the provider to restore it." Marcus looked at him for 3 seconds. "How long?" "Possibly a few weeks." "We don't have a few weeks. We have 9 days." Marcus rose and walked to the window, turning his back on the entire room. He didn't strike the table. He didn't raise his voice. He simply stood there and made the calculation he had avoided making for the past 2 hours. No outsider could alter a file inside their internal system at 2:17 in the morning. No outsider knew that document existed. No outsider knew the date it would be signed. Someone had waited until all 14 attorneys had signed, waited until the document had become valid, then changed a single phrase in Article 9, Section 3, and placed it in his hands, so that he would sign his own sentence with his own hand. "Nico," Marcus said without turning around, "by tonight, I want a list of everyone who had access to that file. Complete. Not one name left out." Adrian folded his tablet closed and smiled. "I'll prepare that list for you right now." Adrian left the room at 7 o'clock that evening, carrying a list of 23 names with access to the file, and his own name appeared on the 4th line. Nico went to inspect the records room. That left 2 people alone in the long room on the 45th floor. Marcus poured himself a glass of water without offering her one, then sat down across from her. "What do you want? Are you truly asking, or are you trying to find out my price? Everyone has a price. Then you're asking the wrong person." Camila pulled her chair closer to the table. "I have 3 conditions. Hear all of them before you answer." Marcus gave a single nod. "First, you marry me." He didn't laugh, but the corner of his mouth moved. "You demanded that this morning, and you've just spent the entire day proving to me that you aren't insane." "I'm still not insane." A civil marriage at the city clerk's office, with a license, notarized documents, and full legal validity under New York state law, along with a separate agreement clearly defining the terms of termination, the division of property, and confirming that there are no obligations beyond what's written on paper. "I don't want your money. I don't want your house. I need one document with both our names on it." "Why?" "I'll tell you when I'm certain." "Not today." Marcus studied her for a long moment. "The second condition. Full access to every legal record belonging to Moretti Holdings from the period 4 years ago. Contracts, minutes, lists of outside contractors, every document bearing a review signature from an outside drafter. No one stands beside me while I read. No one chooses which box I open first. Do you understand what you're asking me to open to someone I've known for 10 hours? "I understand perfectly. And you understand that if I wanted to harm you, I wouldn't have spoken Article 22 aloud in front of 24 cameras this morning. I would have remained silent, allowed you to sign, then sold that clause to the highest bidder." Marcus set down his glass. "The third condition." Camila spoke much more slowly. "From now until this is over, you don't touch anyone. Not one person. No threats, no warnings, no sending men to stand outside anyone's home, and no accidents happening to anyone connected to this. I'll do everything through the law. Only through the law." The room remained silent for a very long time. "No," Marcus said. "You haven't thought about it." "I have. You're asking me to give up the only thing that makes people listen to me." He placed both hands on the table. "Miss Vance, you live in a city governed by law. I live in another city laid directly over yours. In my city, people aren't afraid of the courts. They're afraid of me. If I give you my word on the third condition, someone will test me within 72 hours. If I don't answer, 10 people will test me within a week. By the 14th day, I'll walk into that meeting room with no one left standing behind me. Then say no." "I just did." "Good. At least you didn't lie to me." Camila stood and walked around the head of the table. "But I'm still going to tell you why. And then you can do whatever you want. My father died because he believed a properly written piece of paper could stop a man like you. He was wrong. They killed him anyway. But if I use your hands now to kill someone in return, then I'm no longer avenging my father. I'm killing the very thing he died for." Marcus didn't answer. "I won't be able to stop you," she continued. "I know that. I'm only telling you that the day you do it, I walk out of here, and you'll be left to deal with Article 9, Section 3 on your own." Marcus rose. He walked to the window and stood in the exact place where he had stood that afternoon, then turned back. "Today is October 5th, he said. "On October 14th, the Council of Five meets on Staten Island. It's the 4th anniversary of my father's death, and it's also the day the succession instrument must be approved and signed, not because I want it that way, but because the family charter requires it to be completed within 4 years of the previous head's death. If I don't have a valid instrument by that day, the right of succession becomes available to anyone who can prove they qualify under the Italian version." He looked at her. 9 days. 9 days, Camila repeated. "I agree to the first and second conditions, not the third. If you can live with 2 out of 3, stay. If you can't, Nico will take you home." She thought for exactly 3 seconds. I'll stay. Marcus called Nico upstairs and told him to arrange a room for her on the 42nd floor, the floor reserved for guests of the family, with someone stationed in the hallway throughout the night. Before she left the room, he added one more thing. Miss Vance, someone in this building altered a file at 2:17 in the morning. I don't know who it was yet. Neither do you. Camila stopped at the door. I know one thing. Say it. When I gave my name this morning, one man dropped his document case. He wasn't afraid because I knew about Article 9, Section 3. He was afraid because my name was Vance. That night, the surveillance camera in the hallway on the 42nd floor recorded a man approaching the door to her room at 12:51 in the morning. He didn't knock. He didn't touch the handle. He merely stood there, facing the door, for 40 seconds, then walked straight toward the elevator. The next morning, when Nico ordered the entire night's footage extracted and compared against the list of 23 names, the recording from 12:45 to 1 o'clock in the morning was no longer in the system. At 8 o'clock the next morning, when Camila reached the records floor on the second basement level, Adrian Vale was already standing there, with a key card in his hand. Mr. Moretti assigned me to assist you, he said. I understand I've been instructed not to stand beside you while you read. I'll sit at the far end of the room. Call me if you need anything. You don't need to stay. I do. He opened the door and stepped back to let her enter first. This is a restricted area. Company policy requires one of our people to remain in the room. I didn't make that rule, but I'm the one who'll be disciplined if it's broken. He sat down in the chair in the corner, opened his tablet, and didn't say a single word for the first 40 minutes. Camila pulled down the first records box. She took a hardcover notebook and a pen from her backpack, wrote the date and time at the top of the page, and began to read. You have a younger brother, don't you? He asked the question without looking up from the screen. Camila's hand didn't stop moving. Sam Vance, 13 years old. An ACS case was opened 3 years ago. He's currently living in a temporary foster care facility in Queens. Adrian tapped 2 fingers lightly against his tablet. I have a few friends who work in family services. That isn't how I looked into you, so don't misunderstand me. I serve as an advisor to one of the family's charitable foundations. We fund 4 facilities like that one. If you have something to say it plainly. I am speaking plainly. He looked up, and his voice remained as mild as if he were discussing the weather. Did you know the foster care system in this state conducts periodic reviews? Once every 6 months, they review every open case. They look at whether a relative seeking visitation has stable housing, whether that person has lawful income, and whether they have contact with anyone who has a criminal record or is under investigation. He tilted his head. The next review falls next month. I'm only telling you because I think you should be prepared. Camila turned a page in the file and continued writing in her notebook. There's one more thing, Adrian said. When a facility in New York becomes overcrowded, it's permitted to transfer children to affiliated facilities in other states. Pennsylvania, Ohio, sometimes as far away as North Carolina. It's completely legal, and they don't need the consent of a relative seeking visitation if that person doesn't yet have legal guardianship. The process takes about 3 weeks. He smiled. 3 weeks is rather quick, wouldn't you say? Sometimes it can be even quicker. Camila set down her pen. She didn't look at him. She turned to a fresh page in her notebook, wrote the date, the time, and his name, then copied down every word he had said, beginning with the question about her brother and ending with the last word that had just left his mouth. She wrote slowly and clearly, without leaving out a single word. Adrian watched her do it for 2 full minutes. Then he laughed, and that laughter was the only thing in the room that sounded pleasant. Why are you writing that down? He asked. You aren't a lawyer. No, Camila replied. I'm not. Then those words have no value at all. No one is going to accept the notebook of a convicted criminal as evidence, Miss Vance. I'm telling you this out of goodwill. I know. She capped her pen. My father was once asked that very same question. People asked him why he bothered taking notes when he was only a contract drafter, not a trial attorney, and no one had ever asked him to testify in court. She looked directly at Adrian for the first time. He kept writing anyway. And I'm sitting here now because he did. Adrian's smile didn't disappear, but it stopped moving. He lowered his gaze to the tablet and said nothing more for the next 3 hours. Camila worked until after 1 o'clock in the afternoon. She pulled down the second box, then the third, then the 6th. She compared the numbers on the lids with the records index printed on the wall, and began to notice something she initially thought she had miscounted. The row of shelves containing records from 4 years earlier held 27 boxes, numbered in uninterrupted sequence. She pulled down box number 11. It was light. She opened it and found 14 file folders inside, each with its label still intact, each with its identification number still written in marker along the spine, and every one of them empty. She opened box number 12. Empty. Box number 13. Empty. She moved along the shelves, opening each box in turn, and of those 27 boxes, 8 contained nothing but empty folders. All 8 belonged to the second and third quarters of that year. All 8 covered the period when her father was still alive. No one had torn off the labels. No one had erased the identification numbers. Whoever had done this hadn't tried to hide the fact that the records were gone. That person had only wanted to make certain that when someone came down here looking, they would find exactly what they needed to find and discover that it was empty. Camila set the final box on the floor and stood motionless for a moment. Then she returned to the table, opened her notebook, and added 3 more lines: the identification numbers of the 8 boxes, the dates and quarters, and 1 short sentence for herself to read later. Adrian folded his tablet cover shut, rose to his feet, and adjusted the cuff of his sleeve. "Did you find what you needed?" he asked. "Yes," Camila said. She slipped the notebook into her backpack and pulled the zipper closed. "I found it." On the morning of the 3rd day, Camila placed the notebook on the table in front of Marcus and opened it to the page bearing the identification numbers of the 8 empty boxes. 8 boxes were stripped bare, all of them from the second and third quarters of 4 years ago. Whoever did it assumed that if I couldn't find what I needed in there, I wouldn't be able to find it anywhere. She closed the notebook. That person was wrong. Wrong about what? Your succession instrument isn't an internal document. It's a notarized instrument, and every notarized instrument concerning the ownership structure of a legal entity registered in this state must have a copy filed with the New York Department of State in Albany. That filed copy is a public record. Anyone has the right to request a copy, including me. Marcus sat motionless for a moment. No one has told me that in 4 years, because no one has wanted you to know in 4 years. Nico submitted the request at 9 o'clock that morning and paid for expedited processing. The certified copies arrived at the building at 2 o'clock that afternoon, 3 sets of papers bearing the state's embossed seal, and Camila spread them across the long table in chronological order. 3 versions, she said. Not 1. Marcus rose and walked around the table. The first was filed 6 years ago. The second was filed 2 years ago. The third was filed 11 days ago. She placed her finger on the middle set. The second version is the one your 14 attorneys read and signed off on. It's the version everyone in this building believes is the only one. And the first? That's where it becomes frightening. Camila turned the first set to the page she had marked. Article 9, Section 3. The English text is identical in all 3 versions. Not a single comma was changed. But the phrase erede legittimo was already present in the Italian version filed 6 years ago. It isn't something someone slipped in last week. It was there from the beginning, and it lay dormant for 6 years. Marcus bent over the page. My father signed this. He signed the English version. He read the English version. I don't believe he read the Italian version, because if he had, he would have known he had just signed an instrument stripping his own son of his rights. She turned to the final page. There's one more thing. Look at the certification line. At the bottom of the version filed 6 years earlier was a notarial seal and a signature, accompanied by a commission number. Camila read the name aloud. Marcus shook his head. He didn't recognize it. Nico searched the number in the state's directory of notaries within 3 minutes, then looked up. This man died 5 years ago. A stroke. He was 71. His commission was cancelled after his death. Which means, Camila said, the only person who could confirm how the first version was read aloud and signed is no longer here to answer any questions. And he died exactly 1 year after that version was filed. Marcus straightened. He walked to the end of the table, then turned back. You said the third version was altered at 2:17 in the morning. If Article 9, Section 3 had already been there for 6 years, what did that person change? Camila opened the third set, placed it beside the first, and pointed to 2 lines separated by 3 lines of text. In the first and second versions, erede legittimo is followed by a subordinate clause stating that the order of succession is governed by the general provisions. That clause is ambiguous. A skilled attorney could argue it 3 different ways. She moved her finger to the 3rd set. In the version filed 11 days ago, that ambiguous clause was replaced with a list. A specific order, clearly ranked, with no room left for argument. A list of whom? I haven't finished reading it. I only reached the 2nd line. Camila looked up. But I can tell you what this means. Someone didn't set a trap for you. The trap had already been there for 6 years, laid by someone else. This person merely waited until the signing was close, then stepped in and tightened it so you'd have no way to slip free. Marcus was silent for a very long time. Then he asked the question she had been waiting 2 days to hear. What did your father have to do with this? Camila took the worn, creased printout from her backpack, the paper she had shown him in the car, and placed it beside the version filed 6 years earlier. The 2 handwritten notes at the bottom of the page matched stroke for stroke. 4 years ago, my father was hired to review a series of port contracts connected to your legal entity. He worked for the Port Authority, not for you. But to verify signing authority, he had to request the filed copy of this succession instrument from Albany, exactly as I just did. She placed her finger on the 2 handwritten lines. He read the Italian version. He discovered Article 9, Section 3, and he copied those 2 lines word for word into his own review notes. Marcus looked at her. Why copy them? Because my father wasn't the person who altered that provision. He had no authority to change anything in your family's instrument. He didn't write it. Her voice grew firmer. He copied it so there would be a separate piece of paper somewhere else proving that the sentence existed on that date, in case someone later altered the original. He didn't accuse anyone. He merely left a marker behind. She raised her eyes. 3 weeks later, he was dead. Marcus stood there with one hand resting on the edge of the table, staring at the 3 sets of papers lying side by side. Then he called Nico in and ordered him to preserve all 3 filed versions exactly as they were, allow no one to touch them, and have each one scanned and stored in 3 separate locations before the end of that afternoon. At 4 o'clock, he and Camila went to the city clerk's office on Worth Street. They completed 2 forms, presented their identification, paid the $35 fee, and received a receipt. The clerk behind the counter explained that under state law, the license wouldn't become valid until 24 hours after it was issued, and the marriage ceremony had to take place within 60 days. Camila took the receipt, folded it in half, slipped it into her backpack, and said nothing. On the way out, Marcus asked her only one question. When are you going to finish reading that list? Tonight, she said. Camila read through the night, and at 4 o'clock in the morning, she found it. At 7, she called Marcus down to the small conference room on the 42nd floor, spread the version filed 11 days earlier across the table, and placed her finger on a line in the lower half of page 40. Article 9, Section 4, she said. This is the list. This is what that person entered the system at 2:17 in the morning to write. Marcus sat down. Read it. The order of succession, ranked by degree. 1st degree, biological children. 2nd degree, conjuge legitimo. 3rd degree, full siblings. 4th degree, legally recognized half-siblings. She looked up. Conjuge legitimo means a lawful spouse. 2nd degree. Exactly 2 degrees above half-siblings. Marcus stared at the line for a very long time. You already knew this line existed. No. Camila shook her head. I didn't know it existed. I knew it had to exist. Explain. 6 years ago, someone inserted era de legitimo into the instrument. That person didn't do it because they had a fondness for old Italian. They did it because they wanted the right of succession to follow blood. And if blood was going to matter, there had to be an order of bloodlines. Otherwise, that other provision would have created nothing but chaos, and no one would have gained anything from it. She rested her hand on the version filed 6 years earlier beside her. 6 years ago, this part only said, vaguely, that succession would follow the general provisions. That person left it vague because there was no need to make it clear yet. Only when the signing date drew near did they enter the system and write the ladder they had been waiting 6 years to put in place. Marcus said nothing. I didn't need to read this line to work it out, Camila continued. I only needed to know 3 things. You have no children. You've never been married. And someone in this building believes they're standing on the next rung. If I was right, then the instrument had to contain a place for a spouse, because every law of succession does. And if that place came before siblings, it was the only door still open to you. She took the marriage license receipt from her backpack and placed it on the table. That's why I was standing outside your building on Monday morning. I wasn't proposing to you, Mr. Moretti. I was making a move. Marcus picked up the receipt and turned it over in his hands. Then tell me why it has to be you. I could marry anyone in this city within 48 hours. You could, but you won't find anyone willing, and I have 5 reasons. Camila sat down across from him. First, the person you marry has to be willing to stand publicly beside you while someone has just set a trap to take your life, and there aren't many people like that. Second, I need to get inside this organization to find out who killed my father, and the only way I can enter is as family, not as a stranger you hired. Third, federal law and the law of this state both recognize spousal privilege, which means that when everything falls apart and they call me in for questioning, no one can force me to testify against you, and no one can force you to testify against me. That's the only shield someone with nothing left, like me, can have. Fourth, only as a member of the family will I have the right to speak before the Council of 5 on the 14th. Otherwise they'll throw me out before I can open my mouth. She paused. Fifth, say it. Sam. Camila looked straight at him. Child Protective Services won't release my brother to someone who sleeps in a temporary shelter and has no lawful income. But they'll have to review the case of someone with a stable residential address, a legally registered marriage, and verifiable income. I'm not taking your money. I'm taking the status. That's the only thing in this entire building I truly need. Marcus set the receipt on the table. He didn't say a word for nearly a minute. Then he rose, walked to the window, and when he turned back, something in his face had changed. That day, I asked who you were, he said. You gave me your name. Someone dropped his document case. I remember. At the time, I thought he was startled because you had identified Article 9, Section 3. Marcus slowly shook his head. That wasn't it. 14 attorneys could have discovered Article 9, Section 3 at any moment, and he already had an explanation prepared. He argued it smoothly right there in the room. What he wasn't prepared for were the 3 words you had shouted before that. Marry me. Yes. Marcus looked at her. The moment you said those words in front of him, he understood that someone in this world had read as far as Article 9, Section 4. And Article 9, Section 4 had only been written 8 days earlier, at 2:17 in the morning, in a file that he believed no one but him had touched. Camila sat perfectly still. He wasn't afraid because I was clever, she said. He was afraid because he thought I knew everything. He thought you knew everything, Marcus said, and he thought someone had told you. Which means that since Monday morning, he hasn't been looking for you. He's been looking for the person he believes betrayed him. He picked up his phone. Nico, find Rosa in Bay Ridge. Tell her I'm coming, and I won't be alone. Nico stopped the car half a block from the house and remained inside. Rosa Moretti opened the door and looked her nephew up and down before turning her eyes to the woman standing beside him. In 20 years, you haven't come here more than 4 times, she said. What do you want? I want to ask you about someone. Rosa let them in. She sat in the chair beside the window, invited no one else to sit, then pointed toward the chair across from her. Camila sat down. Who are you? Rosa asked. Camila Vance. Rosa didn't move for 3 seconds. Then she placed both hands on her knees. Thomas's daughter. You knew my father? I remember him. Rosa looked out the window. My brother invited a great many people here for dinner over the course of 40 years. Lawyers, accountants, men from City Hall, men from the Dock Workers Union. They all ate, they all laughed, and they all praised my cooking. And when it was time to leave, every one of them took the envelope waiting on the table by the door. No one refused. Not one person in 40 years. She turned back to Camila. Your father was the only one who didn't take it. He stood at the door, looked at the envelope, then thanked me for cooking dinner and walked out. Camila couldn't speak. Afterward, my brother sat at the table in silence for a very long time. Rosa continued. Then he said to me, "That man is trouble." I asked him what kind of trouble. He didn't answer. Marcus sat on the edge of the chair on the other side. Aunt Rosa, I need to know what her father did for our family. I don't know what he did for your family. I never asked about that, and you know it. Rosa spoke calmly. I only know that he came here 3 times. The last time was in the summer 4 years ago. What did he say to you? We talked about books. She saw the look on Marcus's face and gave a faint shrug. Don't look at me that way. I'm old, but I haven't lost my mind. He talked about books because they were the only thing he dared discuss inside this house. What books? Camila asked. Her voice was softer than she intended. He asked whether I had kept my mother's books. Her dictionaries, her old law books, the few volumes she brought over from the other side. I told him I had. Rosa looked at Camila. Then he said something I still remember. He said, "Ma'am, I never write anything on loose sheets of paper. Loose paper burns. Loose paper slips out of a briefcase, gets picked up by the wrong person, or gets thrown away. I hide everything inside books." She paused. I asked him why books. He said it was because no one burns someone else's book. Camila sat motionless. Something had opened inside her mind, and it was so vast that for several seconds she could no longer hear anything in the room. She said nothing. She merely reached down and grasped the strap of the backpack resting against the leg of her chair, tightening her hand around it. Marcus didn't notice. He was watching his aunt. "Aunt Rosa, I need to ask you something else." "Ask." 4 years ago, before my father died, did he call you?" Rosa was silent for a long time. Then she stood, walked to the window, and remained there with her back to both of them. "You're asking me that now, after 4 years. "I'm asking now because I only just learned that it was a question I needed to ask." She turned around. She walked over to Marcus, and very slowly lowered herself onto the edge of the chair beside him, then took her nephew's hand between both of hers. Her hands were cold. "He called me 3 weeks before he died," Rosa said, "at 11 o'clock at night. In 40 years, he had never once called me at that hour." Marcus didn't pull his hand away. "What did my father say?" "He didn't say anything. He asked me one question." Rosa tightened her grip on his hand. He asked, "Rosa, whose son is Adrian?" No one in the room breathed. "What did you tell him?" Marcus asked, his voice turning hoarse. "I told him he knew better than I did." And then, he was silent for a very long time. Then he said, "I know. That's what worries me." Rosa released Marcus's hand. Then he hung up. That was the last time I ever heard my brother's voice. Marcus rose. He took 2 steps, then stopped in the middle of the room. "You know whose son Adrian is." "I know what I know." Rosa looked down at her hands. "And I won't say it today, Aunt Rosa. Don't force me, Marcus." She looked up. Her eyes were red, but she didn't cry. "I've kept this house for 20 years without taking a single penny from the family, not because I'm innocent. It's because I'm afraid. Do you understand? I've sat inside this house for 20 years, and I've been afraid." She stood and walked to the door. "Go home. Take her back." At the threshold, she caught Camila by the hand. She studied her closely, as though searching for another face within this one. "Did you keep your father's books?" she asked. Camila nodded once. "There's one left." "Then go home tonight," Rosa said, and she closed the door. Camila didn't say a word the entire way back. Marcus asked her twice, and both times she merely shook her head. When they reached the 42nd floor, she closed the door to her room, locked it, and sat down on the floor with the backpack in front of her. Over the past 3 years, she had sold nearly everything she owned. Her mother's coat, her mother's wedding ring, her father's watch, her textbooks from her first year of college, her laptop. Each one had bought her a week or two without having to worry. There was only one thing she had never taken to a pawn shop, though once she had stood outside one for 20 minutes with it in her hands. She took it out of the backpack. An Italian to English legal dictionary. A dark blue hardcover, as thick as 4 fingers, its lower right corner worn gray after spending 4 years at the bottom of her backpack. She rested it on her lap. She had opened this book hundreds of times. She had looked up words in it throughout her 3 years at the public library. She had turned every page and read every penciled note her father had written in the margins. She knew this book by heart. She had noticed the slight thickness of the spine before, but only now, after Rosa's words, did she understand its true purpose. Camila tilted the book sideways and held it closer to the light. The spine was slightly thicker than the covers. Not by much. Roughly 1/8 of an inch. In an old book, anyone would have assumed the glue had come loose or the paper had swollen from dampness. She ran her thumb down the spine from top to bottom. Near the middle, the cloth covering gave slightly beneath her touch, then became firm again, as though something lay underneath it that wasn't joined to the rest. She sat motionless for about a minute. Then she went to the desk drawer and took out a utility knife. She cut along the inside edge of the spine, where the cloth was glued to the cover, slowly. One short section at a time, her hand not entirely steady. The cloth peeled away. Beneath it was a hollow space, about a handspan long, carved into the cardboard and sealed again with a thin piece of paper. Inside that space were two things: a small memory card wrapped in clear plastic, and a sheet of paper folded into quarters. Camila set the book down on the floor. She picked up the paper with both hands and unfolded it. That handwriting, the handwriting that had filled the notes, taped to the refrigerator throughout her childhood, with sentences like, "Remember to turn off the stove. Remember to lock the door. Dad will be home late. Dinner is in the oven." 6 lines. Camila, if you're reading this, then I was wrong. I thought knowing less would keep you safe. It doesn't. People don't kill you because you know. They kill you because you know, and refuse to sell what you know. Don't seek revenge. Tell the truth for me. She read it to the end. Then she started over. Then she read it a third time, more slowly than the first two. And when she reached the 4th line, she had to place the paper on the floor because her hands could no longer hold it. Camila sat on the floor of that room with her arms wrapped around her knees, and for the first time in 4 years, she wept aloud. Not when they read her sentence to her in court. Not when the letter from Colombia arrived. Not when the hospital called about her mother. Not when the Child Protective Services worker led Sam to the car and the boy turned to look back at her through the window. She hadn't cried once through any of it. She cried now, on the floor of a room that wasn't hers, because her father had left that message 4 years ago, and she had carried it on her back for 4 years without knowing. She had carried it into the courtroom. She had carried it to the hospital. She had carried it through 3 years in temporary shelters. She had slept with her head resting on that backpack for hundreds of nights. A long time later, she wiped her face and sat up straight. She removed the memory card from its plastic wrapping, found a card reader in the box of office supplies inside the cabinet drawer, and plugged it into the computer in the room. The card contained only 3 files. The first was a complete scan of the succession instrument filed 6 years earlier, both the English and Italian versions, every page included, along with the notarization page at the end. The second was a scanned collection of port contracts, 19 pages, with penciled notes in the margins written in that same hand. Camila opened both, skimmed through them, and confirmed exactly what she had suspected. The third was an audio file, 4 minutes and 11 seconds. The file creation date was June 12th, 4 years earlier. Camila stared at it for a very long time. She moved the cursor over it, paused, then drew her hand back from the keyboard. She rose, walked to the window, and stood there. Then she returned to the desk, sat down, and looked at the file name again. She didn't click it. There was one thing she understood perfectly, without anyone having to tell her. Those 4 minutes and 11 seconds were the final minutes she would ever have in a world where she didn't know who had done it. The moment she clicked, that world would close forever, and she wanted one more night before it did. Camila removed the memory card, wrapped it in the plastic again, and held it in her palm. She sat down on the floor with her back against the side of the bed, placed her father's note across her knees, and remained there. Beyond the glass, the city lights slowly went dark. She didn't sleep. When morning came, she stood, washed her face, slipped the memory card and the note into the inside pocket of her backpack, then opened the door and headed downstairs. Marcus was standing in the hallway. He looked at her face and didn't ask whether she had slept. "Something happened," he said. "You should see this before you look at your phone." The article went online at 6:10 in the morning. Marcus handed her the tablet in the hallway, and Camila read the headline before she had a chance to sit down. Woman who demanded marriage to Moretti boss was once charged with falsifying records and expelled from Colombia. Beneath it were copies of the criminal court judgment, the university's official expulsion letter bearing its seal, and the adverse ruling issued by the bar's Character and Fitness Committee. All 3 documents were complete, with case numbers and dates, and none of the names had been redacted. "Anonymous source," Marcus said. "Sent to 4 newsrooms at the same time at 4 o'clock this morning. 2 have published it. The other 2 are still verifying." Camila scrolled to the bottom of the article. The final paragraph stated that the documents raised questions about who was truly providing legal counsel to one of the largest corporations in the city. "All 3 of these documents are public records," she said. "Anyone can request them if they know how, but no one thinks to request all 3 within 4 days." Marcus took the tablet back. There's more. Nico stepped out of the elevator holding a sheet of paper. At 9 o'clock this morning, Child Protective Services received a complaint. It was submitted anonymously through the online portal, and it's valid. It requests an unscheduled review of Sam Vance's case, citing the fact that the relative seeking visitation has a criminal record and ties to a legal entity currently being named in the press. He handed the paper to Camila. They're required to open a review. The law leaves them no choice. No one can refuse it. Camila took the paper and read it from beginning to end. She read it a second time. Then she folded it into quarters and slipped it into her coat pocket. Her hands didn't tremble. Is there anything else? She asked. Nico looked at Marcus before answering. Last night, 3 members of the Council of 5 called me. 3 calls within 40 minutes. All 3 said the same thing. They support postponing approval of the instrument beyond the 14th, citing a dispute over the translation that must be clarified. Marcus didn't move. 3 out of 5. 3 out of 5, Nico said. If approval is delayed beyond the 14th, then under the Charter, the right of succession becomes available to anyone who can prove eligibility under the Italian version. Marcus set the tablet on the windowsill. He stood motionless for a long time, then spoke in a perfectly ordinary voice, and it was the very ordinariness of that voice that made Nico straighten. Get me those 3 people. One at a time. I'll speak to each of them privately. No. Camila stepped in front of him. Miss Vance, what are you planning to say to them? I intend to remind them who pays for the chairs they're sitting in. And if they don't remember? Marcus didn't answer. Then it's exactly what I thought, Camila said. Listen to me. This morning, 4 newsrooms received documents about me, and a complaint was filed concerning my brother. Both actions were entirely legal. No one was threatened. No one had a finger laid on them, and there isn't a single word in any of it that could support a criminal charge. That's how he attacks me. She pointed toward his phone. If you call those 3 people now, and even one of them reports it, then 2 weeks from now, the only name in the investigative file will be yours, not his. He'll remain clean. He's kept himself clean for 19 years. Marcus turned to Nico. 19 years? Nico nodded slowly. Adrian entered the inner circle when you were 17. I remember because I was the one who drove him there the first time. He looked at Marcus. I'm not saying this to defend anyone. For 19 years, you haven't eaten a single meal without him sitting at the same table. Wherever Mr. Salvatore went, he went. Wherever you went, he went. At your mother's funeral, he stood behind you for 4 hours. No one spoke in the hallway for a while. Then I need proof, Marcus said. You'll have it, Camila replied. But not by doing things your way. We'll do it mine. How long will your way take? 8 days. Exactly the amount of time you gave me. She pulled the strap of her backpack higher onto her shoulder. Those 3 people didn't turn against you because they hate you. They did it because someone told them your instrument was flawed, and they're afraid to sign something defective. That fear is real. It isn't betrayal. If you want to bring them back, you don't threaten them. You give them an instrument with no flaws and a name they can blame. I already have that name. You have a suspicion. You can't place a suspicion on the conference table. Marcus watched her for a long time. Then he picked up his phone, and Nico moved half a step forward, but Marcus merely slipped it into his pocket. 8 days, he said. Nico, no one calls those 3 people. No one goes near their homes. If I hear that even one car has been parked outside the home of anyone on that list of 23 names, you'll be the first person I question. Nico nodded and went downstairs. The 2 of them were left alone in the hallway. What are you going to do today? Marcus asked. Camila took the paper from her coat pocket, unfolded it, and looked at the date scheduled for the review. Today, I keep working, she said. Tomorrow, I visit my brother. I'm allowed to see him twice a month, and I've never missed a single visit. She folded the paper again. If I miss one now, then he wins with nothing more than a complaint filed online. Camila took the subway to Queens alone. She refused to let Nico drive her, and she didn't tell Marcus what time she was leaving. For 3 years, she had always come by train, always arrived 20 minutes early, and always waited on the stone bench in the courtyard before going inside to sign the register. The woman at the reception desk handed her the sign-in form and a pen. There's a note here that your brother's case has been opened for an unscheduled review, she said. Am I still allowed to see him? Yes, The review doesn't affect a scheduled visit. The woman paused. Sign the bottom line as well. Camila signed both lines. Sam was sitting at a table in the common room, building something out of interlocking plastic pieces. He heard the door and turned around, and the moment he recognized his sister, his whole body seemed to spring out of the chair at once. Camila. Camila dropped into a crouch and wrapped her arms around him. He had grown taller again. His shoulders were already level with her chest. She held him a little longer than usual, and when she let go, she smiled the same ordinary smile she always did. How's your breathing? Normal. How many times a week does normal mean? Twice, but only a little. Sam shrugged. The nurse says everyone gets like that this time of year. Camila took his wrist and turned it over to make sure the bracelet bearing his medication information was still intact. It was. She released him. Where do you keep your emergency inhaler? In my bag. It's always in my bag. You ask me that every time. I'll ask every time until you're 30. Sam laughed and pulled her over to the table. He pointed to what he had been building. I've been working on this for 3 weeks. This is the frame. This is where the door goes. I was going to build the whole staircase, but I ran out of the long pieces. It's beautiful. Look closer. I had to calculate this part again because it was crooked the first time. How did you calculate it? The boy explained, and she listened to every word without interrupting him once. He talked about those plastic pieces for nearly 10 minutes. Camila nodded in the right places, asked questions in the right places, and for those 10 minutes, she didn't think about a single document. Camila, Sam said after finishing the last row. Yes? Someone here said I might have to move next spring. Camila kept her expression unchanged. Who told you that? A boy older than me. He's gone now. He left last month, for another state. Sam picked up one of the plastic pieces and turned it over in his hand. He said when it gets too crowded here, they move some people somewhere else. No one has said anything to you? No. He was still looking at the piece in his hand. Camila, what is it? When are you coming to get me? Camila didn't answer at once. She sat there and allowed the question to remain between them, while beyond the window came the sound of children running across the courtyard. She had been asked that question 72 times in 3 years. She had counted, and all 72 times, she had given him the same answer. I'm trying, Sam. This time she answered differently. I'm finishing something Dad left undone, she said. Sam looked up. What did Dad leave undone? He had one thing he didn't finish. He left it for me. I'm finishing it for him. Will it take long? Not much longer. Camila reached out and brushed his hair back. When it's done, I'm coming to get you. The boy studied her for a very long time. He was 13 years old, and he had learned how to tell when adults were merely saying something to make him stop asking. He looked into his sister's face, and he believed her. Okay, he said. Then he bent down and gathered a few more plastic pieces. Then I'll leave the staircase unfinished. When you come to get me, I'll finish it at home. Camila nodded. For nearly 10 seconds, she couldn't say anything. She picked up one of the plastic pieces and fitted it into the exact place he had just shown her. When visiting hours ended, she walked toward the door, and Sam ran after her as far as the threshold, just as he did every time. He wasn't allowed into the courtyard. He stood there and raised his hand, and she turned back and raised hers in return. Only when she reached the gate did she allow herself to look back one more time. The boy was still standing in the doorway. On the train home, Camila sat in a nearly empty car, her backpack resting on her lap, both hands placed over it. She thought about the complaint filed at 9 o'clock the previous morning. Anonymous, valid, without a single word that could reveal who had written it. She thought about the person who had sat in the corner of the records room and spoken to her about the process of transferring a case to another state in the voice of someone discussing the weather. That person had calculated one thing perfectly. They knew that if they struck at her, she could endure it, but if they struck at the boy, she would run. Camila unlocked the inner compartment of her backpack and rested her hand on the memory card wrapped in plastic. She remained that way until the train crossed the river. Then she took out her phone and sent Marcus exactly one line. Tonight I need a room with a computer that isn't connected to any network, and no one standing outside the door. Marcus had the room set up that very night, with an old computer stripped of every network cable and even its wireless card removed, placed inside the small conference room on the 42nd floor. He locked the door and gave her the key. Camila inserted the memory card at 11 o'clock that night. She opened the first 2 files, compared every scanned page against the 3 filed copies obtained from Albany, and by 2 o'clock in the morning, she had everything she needed. She still didn't open the 3rd file. On the morning of the 8th day, they went to Worth Street. Nico drove. Rosa sat in the back beside Camila and didn't say a word throughout the ride. Only when they got out of the car did she take hold of Camila's elbow for a moment before letting go. There were no flowers, no guests. No one had been told. Marcus wore the same suit he wore every day, and Camila wore the gray sweater she had bought at a thrift store 3 years earlier. They took a number and waited on a row of plastic chairs with 4 other couples. One couple had brought their entire family, and children ran around the waiting room. Another couple argued quietly about forgetting their paperwork. Their number was called after 40 minutes. The ceremony room was small, painted pale yellow, with a wooden lectern and a state flag in one corner. The official behind the lectern was a middle-aged man wearing glasses, who had probably done this several thousand times. He checked the license, checked their identification, showed the 2 witnesses where to sign, then looked up. "We'll begin." He read the opening words in the flat voice of a man reciting something from memory. Then he turned to Marcus. "Do you, Marcus Moretti, take this woman to be your lawful wife?" Camila looked straight at the flag in the corner. "This is a contract." She had told herself that 3 times on the way there. "This is Article 9.4, second tier, conjuge legitimo. 1 line of text and 1 seal, nothing more." Marcus didn't answer at once. He allowed 3 seconds to pass, and 3 seconds inside a room like that felt long. "I do," he said. He spoke more slowly than necessary. Each word stood apart from the other. The official noticed nothing, and turned to the next page. Rosa noticed. She sat in the front row and watched her nephew for a very long time. "And do you, Camila Vance," the official read, "take this man to be your lawful husband?" Camila didn't hear the rest of the question. She heard her name, Camila Vance, her full name, spoken aloud, inside a room with a state flag and an official seal, by a man in a white shirt, carrying out the duties of the state. No one had called her that in 4 years. At the shelter, she was bed number 41. At her night job, she was that girl over there. In the courtroom, she was the defendant. At Child Protective Services, she was the relative seeking visitation. Case file Vance, S. In the records of the bar's Character and Fitness Committee, that name appeared beside the words Permanent Adverse Determination. This was the first time in 4 years that her name had been spoken inside a government building without an accusation attached to it. Her hand rested on the edge of the lectern, and she felt it trembling. She tightened it into a fist. Marcus saw. He said nothing. "I do," Camila said. Signing the papers took 2 minutes. Nico signed on the first witness line. Rosa signed on the second. Her handwriting slanted and unsteady, and after she set the pen down, she sat for a long time staring at that piece of paper. The official stamped it, separated 1 copy, handed it to them, and called the next number. 7 minutes in all. Once they were outside, Rosa said the only words she spoke that entire morning. "Hold on to this carefully." She handed Camila the copy of the certificate, folded in half. "Don't leave it in that building." Then she got into the car with Nico. Marcus and Camila walked along Worth Street toward the parking lot. Halfway there, he stopped and removed a thin file from his briefcase. "What is this?" "A motion to vacate your conviction," he said, "with affidavits from 2 handwriting experts, a copy of the university system access logs obtained by my lawyer, and a fully drafted petition ready to be filed. All you have to do is sign." Camila opened it and read the first page. Then she turned to the second, then the third. She read carefully. It was good. It was very good. It was what she hadn't been able to afford to have someone prepare for her in 4 years. She folded it closed and handed it back to him. "You didn't finish reading it." "I read enough to know it'll work." Marcus didn't take it. "Then why?" "Because my father lost everything rather than accept an envelope at the door," Camila said. "And I just signed a piece of paper to gain legal standing through you. I know that. I chose it. And I won't apologize for it. But my name is different." She pushed the file toward him. "If I win my name back with your lawyers and your money, then that name will belong to you too. I'll be nothing more than another line in the Moretti family's inventory of assets. I'll take it back myself, with my own hands, with the degree I'll earn all over again, no matter how late it is." Marcus took the file and stood there for a very long time. "Do you know how many years too late you'll be?" I do. He nodded once, placed it back inside his briefcase, and never mentioned it again. In the car on the way back, Camila held the copy of the marriage certificate in her hands and looked out the window. Tonight, she said, I'm going to open the third file. Marcus turned toward her. What file? She took the memory card from her coat pocket. There's an audio recording that lasts 4 minutes and 11 seconds. My father hid it inside the spine of the dictionary. I've had it for 4 days, and I still haven't been able to press play. She placed it in the palm of his hand. You'll listen to it with me. Marcus told the driver to take the long way around and switch off the communication screen in the front. He inserted the memory card into the laptop resting on his knees. Camila sat beside him with both hands on her backpack, looking straight through the windshield instead of at the screen. Are you ready? Play it. The first sound was a chair scraping across a wooden floor, then water being poured, then the deep voice of an old man, speaking English with the cadence of someone who had learned it after the age of 20. Marcus went rigid. Camila caught it from the corner of her eye, and she knew at once whose voice it was. Mr. Vance, I asked you here because I like the way you work. You read carefully. Very few people read carefully anymore. A second voice answered, and Camila stopped breathing. She hadn't heard that voice in 4 years. It was lower than she remembered. Thank you, sir. I have a small matter for you. In the set of notes you sent to the Port Authority, there are several lines concerning an instrument that falls outside the scope of your work. I'd like you to revise those lines. Just remove them. You don't have to add anything. I can't remove them, sir. Why not? Because I've already signed the review. If I take those 2 lines out, my notes will no longer accurately reflect what I read. I'd be violating the standards of my profession. Mr. Vance, I'm not asking you to lie. I'm asking you to remain silent about something that doesn't concern you. To me, those are the same thing. A long silence followed in the recording, the sound of a glass being set on the table. Do you have children? I have 2. What does the older one study? She studies law. I see. The old man's voice didn't change in the slightest. It didn't rise. He didn't place emphasis on a single word. Then you should understand me all the more. People in your profession often think that if a document is written correctly, that's enough. I've lived for 70 years, and I've never seen a piece of paper capable of protecting itself. Sir, I'm not trying to protect any piece of paper. I simply won't erase what I wrote. Silence again. Then the old man spoke his final words, still calm, almost weary. Very well. Go home and think it over. I'll have my boy contact you. Marcus reached out and pressed pause. On the screen, the progress bar stopped at 2 minutes and 40 seconds. There was still 1 minute and 31 seconds left. He didn't press play again. He closed the laptop, rested one hand on its lid, and sat that way. The car was climbing the slope of the Brooklyn Bridge. There's more, Camila said. I know. Play it. Wait. Marcus leaned forward and spoke to the driver. Pull over. Turn on the hazard lights. The car stopped in the innermost lane, midway across the bridge. Marcus sat upright again, and he didn't look at her. 4 years ago, in June, I was 32 years old. My father had put me in charge of the legal division 6 months earlier. He didn't trust me completely yet, so he only gave me matters he considered unimportant. He spoke in an even voice, as though reading from an official statement. One afternoon, someone placed 3 pages on my desk. They were review notes written by an outside contract specialist named Thomas Vance, concerning Article 9, Section 3 of the family's succession instrument. Camila didn't turn her head. She stared straight at the steel column ahead. I skimmed them, Marcus said. It took me about 2 minutes. I thought he was an outsider meddling in matters that weren't his concern, a port contract specialist, commenting on my family's private affairs. I found it irritating, and I did exactly what I've done with every irritating problem for the last 4 years. He stopped. I passed it to the person I trusted most. I wrote 1 sentence in the corner of the page. Handle this for me. And then I gave it to Adrian. No one in the car said a word. Outside, a truck passed, and the entire passenger compartment trembled slightly. 3 weeks later, your father died on Interstate 278. Marcus said. I didn't know about that until this morning. I never asked Adrian how he had handled it. I didn't ask because I didn't want to know. In 4 years, I never once thought about those 3 pages until you stood on the steps and told me your name. He turned toward her. I didn't give the order, but I was the hand that passed those 3 pages along. If I'd read them carefully that afternoon, or if I'd held on to them and asked myself why a stranger would dare write something like that, your father might still be alive. Camila continued staring straight ahead. I'm telling you this now, Marcus said, because I signed a document this morning, and you have the right to know before you stand beside me for even one more day. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I have nothing to offer in exchange for that. He fell silent. Camila remained perfectly still for a very long time. She didn't cry. She didn't say a single word. Then she lowered her gaze, removed the memory card from the laptop on his knees, and slipped it into the inner pocket of her backpack. She pulled the zipper closed. Then she opened the car door. Camila. She stepped out onto the roadway, closed the door behind her, and walked toward Brooklyn along the pedestrian path across the bridge, her backpack hanging from one shoulder, never looking back once. Marcus took 2 steps after her, then stopped. He stood beside the open car door, beneath the flashing hazard lights, and watched her walk until she was nothing more than a shadow at the far end of the bridge. Then he called Nico and spoke exactly 1 sentence. Don't let anyone follow her. Camila walked the length of the bridge and kept going for another 40 minutes, and by 2 o'clock in the morning, she was standing before the familiar door in Brooklyn. The night attendant looked at her, then at the register. Bed 41? If it's still available. It is. The woman asked nothing more. Camila lay down on the bunk she had slept in for 3 years, her backpack beneath her head, and she didn't sleep. At 6 o'clock in the morning, she sat up, went to the row of tables outside the communal dining room, opened her hardcover notebook, and turned to a blank page. At the top, she wrote a name, Marcus Moretti. She stared at it for nearly a minute, then drew a line through it. She wrote it again on the line below. She looked at it once more and crossed it out again. She wrote it a 3rd time, and this time she didn't strike it out, but she didn't write anything beside it either. She simply left it there. Then she moved down 3 lines and wrote another name, Adrian Vale. Beside it, she wrote 3 numbers and 1 word, 19 years. She set down her pen and looked at the 2 names resting on the same sheet of paper. Marcus Moretti had held those 3 pages in his hands and passed them on because he didn't want to be bothered. That was indifference. Adrian Vale had held those same 3 pages and known exactly what to do with them. That was a decision. Camila had walked for 4 hours to understand the difference between those 2 things, and now she understood it. If she walked away this morning, if she tore up the certificate in her backpack and disappeared from this city, then on October 14th, exactly 1 person would rise inside that room on Staten Island and claim everything. Not the man who had been indifferent, the man who had made the decision. Camila closed the notebook. She opened her wallet and removed a business card from the innermost compartment, its corners softened with age. Gwen Marsh, investigative reporter. Someone had pressed it into her hand 3 years earlier, outside the courthouse, after the verdict was handed down. She had never called the number. She called it at 7:15. The woman on the other end listened to her for 40 seconds before interrupting. Where are you? Brooklyn. Give me the address. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Gwen Marsh arrived in 18. She sat down at a table in the shelter's dining room, placed her computer in front of her, and listened to everything without interrupting once. Then she spoke. I've been following the Moretti family for 7 years. I've written 3 investigative series. Not one of them ever reached the core. They're so clean it's infuriating. She looked at Camila. And now a woman sleeping in this shelter is telling me she has a recording of Salvatore Moretti's voice and a handwritten statement from a man who died 4 years ago. You understand that I have to verify every part of this. I want you to verify every part of it. It took Gwen 2 hours. She sent photographs of the 6 handwritten lines to a document examiner in Newark, along with 2 other samples of Thomas Vance's handwriting taken from public court records, and the answer came back 40 minutes later. The same person had written them, with a high degree of confidence. She extracted the metadata from the 3 files on the memory card and confirmed that the audio file had been created on June 12th, 4 years earlier, with no evidence that it had been altered afterward. She looked up the notary public, who had authenticated the filing submitted 6 years earlier, retrieved the death certificate from public health records, and compared the dates. Then she opened the audio file. She listened to all 4 minutes and 11 seconds without stopping, and when it ended, she sat motionless for a very long time. How far did you listen? She asked. 2 minutes and 40 seconds. Then you haven't heard the end. Gwen rewound the recording. After the old man says the line about my boy, there's the sound of a chair scraping back, a door opening, and footsteps moving into the hallway. The microphone was still recording inside your father's coat pocket. She put on the headphones and slid one side toward Camila. There's a third voice, out in the hallway, speaking to the old man. Camila picked up the earpiece. She didn't raise it to her ear. Is it clear? No. It's faint and buried beneath the noise. Gwen typed several lines. But I know somewhere that can process it. There's a lab in Jersey that specializes in isolating background noise for evidence used in court proceedings. If I send it now, I can have a filtered version by tomorrow afternoon, along with a technical report that'll be admissible in court. Camila placed the earpiece back on the table. Send it. I won't listen yet. The first time I hear it, I'll hear it with the person who needs to hear it. Gwen studied her for a moment, then nodded and clicked send. While they waited, she opened another window. In the meantime, I'm going to look into this. You asked me why someone would wait 6 years to insert a single word into a succession instrument. He already has money, so what is he missing? She entered Adrian Vale's name into the Vital Records database. Born 42 years ago in Suffolk County, New York. Original birth certificate. Father's name left blank. She scrolled down. And this is where it gets interesting. 28 years ago, an application to amend that birth certificate was filed with the county registrar's office, requesting that the father's name be added. The person who filed it was Salvatore Moretti. Camila looked up. He withdrew the application, Gwen said. 4 days later, no reason was entered in the record. She turned the screen toward Camila. He isn't missing money, Miss Vance. He's missing the name. 28 years ago, someone picked it up, held it before him, and then put it back down. He was 14 years old. Camila stared at the line recording the date of withdrawal for a very long time. Then she opened her notebook to the page bearing the 2 names and wrote 2 more words beneath the second line. 4 days. I need to see someone in Bay Ridge, she said. Camila arrived in Bay Ridge at 7 o'clock that evening, and she came alone. Rosa opened the door and didn't look surprised in the slightest. I've been waiting for you since this afternoon, she said. How did you know I would come? Because you signed your name on that paper yesterday. And when you sign something, you have to take responsibility for what you signed. She closed the door. Sit down. Camila sat in the chair across from the window, the same chair she had occupied 4 days earlier. Rosa didn't sit. She went into the back room, and when she returned, she was holding an ivory paper envelope, its corners yellowed with age. She placed it in Camila's lap. Open it. Inside were 4 handwritten pages, covered in bold, slanting script in black ink. The final page bore the embossed seal of a notary public and the signatures of 2 witnesses. Camila read the first line, and her hand went still. This is a will. The second one. Rosa sat down. My brother wrote it by hand without the help of any lawyer. He walked to a notary's office in Bensonhurst, a place no one knew about, and had it notarized 3 months before he died. Camila read as far as the 3rd page, and there she found it. 1 short paragraph, 6 lines, written so plainly that there was no room for dispute. Adrian Vale, born in Suffolk County, was excluded from all rights of succession, all beneficial interests, and all authority to act as a representative within the organization, regardless of any provision contained in any instrument executed before or after this one. His name. No veiled language, no use of the word heir, only his name. You kept this for 4 years, Camila said. 4 years. Why didn't you give it to Marcus? Rosa looked down at her hands. Because I was afraid. She didn't lower her voice when she said it, and she made no attempt to soften the truth. For 20 years, I haven't taken a single penny from the family. Everyone says Rosa is honest. Rosa is clean. I sat inside this house for 20 years because I was afraid, not because I was clean. Camila lowered the will. 4 years ago, my brother came here, Rosa said. He sat exactly where you're sitting now. He gave me this envelope and asked me to keep it for him. I asked him how long. He said until he told me otherwise. She paused. 3 months later, on an evening in October, he called me for the last time. He said, Rosa, it's time. He told me he was going to reveal the truth about Adrian at the council meeting, and that he would read what was inside this envelope himself, in front of all 5 chairs. Rosa raised her eyes. 4 days later, he was dead. They said it was a stroke. He was 74 years old and had suffered from high blood pressure for 20 years. No one asked another question. Camila sat perfectly still. 4 days, she said. 4 days. What date did he die? October 14th. No one in the room spoke. Tomorrow, Camila said slowly. Tomorrow, Rosa replied. The anniversary of my brother's death, and the same day that other instrument must be signed. The family's bylaws require it to happen 4 years from the day the previous head dies. Those 2 dates coincide for a reason. My brother died on the exact day that, 4 years later, the instrument would have to be opened. Camila lifted the 4 pages and held them in both hands. If you had brought this forward 4 years ago, she said, everything would have been different. I know. I don't blame you. You should. Rosa rose and walked to where Camila was sitting. She bent down and took Camila's hands in hers, enclosing the pages between them. Her hands were still as cold as they had been the day before. There's something I have to tell you. Something I meant to carry with me to the grave. Camila looked up. Your father sat in this very chair, Rosa said. In the summer, 4 years ago. We talked about books. I told you that part. What I didn't tell you was that when he stood to leave, I followed him to the door. Her hands tightened around Camila's. I knew my brother had invited him to the house the week before. I knew your father had refused something. I didn't know what it was, but I knew he had refused because I saw my brother's face afterward. Her voice didn't break, but it grew quieter. I stood at that door and watched your father walk down the steps, and I meant to call him back. I meant to tell him one thing. Be careful. She fell silent for a moment. I didn't call out. I closed the door and went into the kitchen. Camila didn't pull her hands away. 3 weeks later, he was dead, Rosa said. And that is what I've carried for 4 years. Not the envelope. The door. Camila sat there with her hands enclosed in the old woman's hands, unable to speak for a very long time. Then she bowed her head, and Rosa lifted one hand and rested it on Camila's hair. And the 2 women sat that way in the room, neither of them weeping aloud. A long time later, Rosa straightened. What time is the meeting tomorrow? 10 o'clock in the morning, Staten Island. Tell Nico to pick me up at 7. You don't have to come. Yes, I do. Rosa walked to the cabinet, took out her coat, and hung it from the hook beside the door, ready for the next morning. 4 years ago, I stood at this door and didn't walk through it. Tomorrow, I will. She turned back to Camila. And I won't sit in a wheelchair. No one will guide me, and no one will support my arm. I'll walk into that room on my own 2 feet. Camila stood and slipped the will into the inner compartment of her backpack, beside the memory card and the paper bearing the 6 lines written by her father. At the threshold, she turned back. Rosa. What? Tomorrow, sit in the back row. When I call your name, come forward. Rosa nodded once. I've been waiting 4 years for you to call me. At 10 o'clock on the morning of October 14th, 5 men sat around the long table in the back room of a restaurant on Staten Island. Marcus sat at the head of the table. Nico stood by the door. Adrian Vale rose before anyone could say a word and placed a file in the center of the table. Gentlemen, today marks the 4th anniversary of Mr. Salvatore's death, and it is also the final day for the succession instrument to take effect. I ask for 5 minutes to present my case. He opened the file. These are the results of a paternity test performed last week by a certified laboratory, comparing my sample with Mr. Salvatore's preserved sample. The probability of a father and son relationship is 99.9%. I am his son. No one spoke. The man in the 3rd chair set down his glass. Under Article 9, Section 3 of the instrument, the right of succession belongs to the heire de legitimo, the heir by blood. Under Section 4, the order is biological children, lawful spouses, full siblings, and then paternal half-siblings. Adrian turned the page. Mr. Marcus has no children. Mr. Marcus has no wife. Mr. Marcus has no full siblings. I am next in line. He placed a second document on the table. As for the woman the press has been mentioning these past several days, I submit her criminal judgment and expulsion order. I don't present them to humiliate anyone. I present them so that you gentlemen understand that the source of every dispute over the translation this past week is a woman with a criminal conviction for falsifying records. The door opened. Camila walked in. She went to the opposite end of the table, set her backpack on a chair, and took out 3 things. She placed them on the table in order, one at a time. First, She pushed the first document into the center of the table. A civil marriage certificate issued by the Office of the New York City Clerk on October 12th. It bears an official seal, a record number, and the signatures of 2 witnesses, Mr. Word. Moretti has had a lawful wife for the past 2 days. The man in the first chair picked it up and read it. Second in the order, Camila said. Above fourth. Miss Vance, Adrian said. Second. She laid down 4 handwritten pages. A codicil to the will of Mr. Salvatore Moretti, handwritten and notarized in Bensonhurst 3 months before his death. Page 3. The middle paragraph. Please read the name, gentlemen. The man in the second chair pulled it toward him. He read it, then looked up at Adrian, then read it again. Excluded from all rights of succession, regardless of any provision executed before or after this document, Camila said. Named explicitly, Adrian Vale. Third. She placed 3 sets of embossed documents on the table. 3 filed versions of the succession instrument obtained from the New York State Department of State, the version from 6 years ago, the version from 2 years ago, and the version from 11 days ago. Article 9, Section 4, the order of succession Mr. Vale just read to you, appears only in the final version. It was written at 2:17 in the morning, 8 days after 14 attorneys had signed off on their review. Adrian laughed. It was a genuine laugh, soft and easy, and he turned toward the 5 chairs. Gentlemen, the person standing here and offering an interpretation of this family's instrument is not an attorney. She has never been licensed to practice law. She has a criminal conviction for falsifying records. Under New York state law, she has no standing to make a legal argument anywhere, including in this room. He looked at Camila. Who are you to stand here? Camila didn't argue. She rested one hand on the edge of the table. You're right, she said. I'm not an attorney. I was expelled from law school 3.5 years ago. I have a criminal conviction. For the past 3 years, I've slept in bed 41 at a shelter in Brooklyn, and 10 days ago, I was still sleeping there. She looked around the table. In another 2 nights, I may be sleeping there again. I don't know. She placed one finger on the 3 sets of documents, but these papers don't care who I am. The seal of the state remains the seal of the state when the person holding it is homeless. Mr. Salvatore's handwriting remains his handwriting, whether the person reading it has a degree or not. She raised her head. They remain true even when the person who brings them here is no one at all. That is the entire meaning of the law, and that is what my father died believing. No one said a word. Camila turned toward the door. Mrs. Rosa Moretti. Rosa rose from the back row. No one helped her. She walked from the rear of the room to the table, 14 slow steps, without holding on to anything. She placed her hand on the will. My brother gave me this 4 years ago and told me to keep it safe. 3 months later, he called and told me he was going to reveal it at the meeting. She looked around at the 5 chairs. 4 days later, he died. Today is that day. The man in the 4th chair set down his glass with a hard thud. Camila took out her phone and placed it on the table. There is one more thing. These are the final 80 seconds of a recording my father made 4 years ago. The background noise was filtered by a forensic laboratory in New Jersey, and the technical report is attached. I've never heard this version either. She pressed play. There was the sound of a door opening. Footsteps. Then the old man's voice, distant, somewhere out in the hallway. And then there was a third voice, closer to the microphone, clear and composed, the voice everyone in that room had heard for 19 years. Don't concern yourself with it anymore. Let me handle it. The recording ended. No one in the room moved. Then the man in the 1st chair pushed back his chair and stood, and the other 4 men rose with him, and all 5 turned their backs on Adrian Vale at the same time. Nico stepped forward. Adrian didn't run. He remained beside the table, one hand still resting on his file. Marcus rose. No one touches him, he said. Nico, keep him here. Not one finger. He walked around the table and stopped before the man who had stood behind him for 19 years. You wanted to bear the Moretti name, Marcus said. Fine. Then you'll face the consequences under that exact name. In court, your full name printed on the record. He took out his phone and called a number he had already saved. Adrian watched his hand, and for the first time that morning, his expression changed. Who are you calling? Marcus raised the phone to his ear. I called them at 6 o'clock this morning. This is the 2nd call. 4 minutes later, the the door opened. The men who entered didn't belong to the family. 4 federal agents walked into the room, the first holding up a search warrant, and the first name read aloud in that room was Adrian Vale. 2 years later, the name Moretti Holdings still stood on the building in Manhattan, but no member of the family occupied the 45th floor anymore. Marcus Moretti had called the United States Attorney's Office before he ever walked into the meeting room on Staten Island, and he hadn't called to bargain. The corporation entered into a deferred prosecution agreement, accepted an independent monitor appointed by the court to remain inside the company for 5 years, and surrendered every record connected to the divisions that, for 40 years, no one outside the family had ever been allowed to see. Marcus personally signed a cooperation agreement, pleaded guilty to 1 count of obstruction, received probation, and was barred from holding any executive position for 5 years. He appealed none of it. He walked out of the courtroom that day with a piece of paper in his hand, and no authority left to command anyone. Adrian Vale was charged with multiple crimes, including one offense that, 4 years earlier, no one had dared to mention. The case involving Thomas Vance's death on Interstate 278 was reopened at the prosecution's request, and Gwen Marsh's investigation ran on the front page for 6 consecutive editions. Camila didn't ask a lawyer for help. She wrote the motion to vacate her conviction herself, gathered the expert affidavits herself, filed everything with the court herself, and stood alone for 40 minutes before a judge who had no idea who she was. Her conviction was vacated. 4 months later, Columbia reinstated her. She completed her final year while working the night shift, and the following summer, she passed the New York State bar examination on her first attempt. On the day she was admitted to the bar, the person calling the names in the ceremony read her full name aloud, and she stood there listening to every syllable, thinking of a morning on Worth Street. Sam had come home 3 months earlier. Camila signed the papers at the child welfare office, carried his bag of belongings out to the car, and on the way home, the boy sat in the front seat with his backpack clasped on his lap, staring through the window without speaking for half the journey. Then he turned toward her. "Camila." "Yes? Did you finish Dad's work?" "I did," Camila said. Sam nodded once, then lowered his eyes, unzipped his backpack, and took out the plastic building pieces he had kept for 2 years. "Then tonight I'll finish the staircase." Her office in Brooklyn was small, just 2 rooms on the ground floor of an old building 4 blocks from the shelter where she had once lived. She represented 2 kinds of clients without charging them: people with no permanent place to live and people accused of crimes who couldn't afford anyone to stand beside them. The sign outside the door bore only 2 words and 1 symbol: Vance and Vance. No one asked who the second Vance was, and whenever someone did, she told them. One afternoon in September, Marcus came to see her. He arrived on foot, with no car waiting outside and no one accompanying him. He placed a thin file on her desk. "What is this?" "The termination agreement. You wrote that clause into it from the beginning, remember? A fixed term and conditions for termination." He pushed it toward her. "I've signed it. Once you sign, it's over." Camila opened a drawer and took out the copy of their marriage certificate she had kept for 2 years. She held it in both hands and tore it in half in front of him, then tore it once more. "It's over." Marcus looked at the pieces of paper on the desk. "Then this file. Take it home." She pushed it back toward him. "I don't need you to sign a paper to leave me, and I don't need you to sign one to stay." He stood there for a very long time. "Then what do I need?" "You ask me again from the beginning," Camila said. "Not through a clause. Not through a challenge on the courthouse steps in front of 20 phones. You ask me the way a man asks a woman, and you accept that I may say no." Marcus Moretti stood in the middle of that small room, with no company, no name that made people lower their voices, and nothing left to place on the table except himself. And for the first time in his life, he opened his mouth, asked a question, and stood quietly while he waited for someone else's answer. This story leaves us with 3 things worth carrying with us. First, we judge people by where they sleep, by the clothes they wear, by the worn backpack hanging from their shoulders, and nearly every time, we are wrong. 14 of the finest lawyers read a contract and saw nothing, while a woman sleeping in a shelter read it in 3 minutes and saw everything, not because she was more capable than they were, but because they read to confirm while she read to understand. Second, there are things a person refuses to sell, and what they refuse to sell is what defines who they are. Thomas Vance needed only to erase 2 lines to live another 30 years, but he didn't erase them, and 4 years later, those 2 lines rose and spoke for him in a room he had never entered. Third, Some wounds never heal the way they once were. Camila couldn't bring back her father or reclaim the 4 years she had lost, but she reclaimed her name and brought her brother home, and she transformed the place that hurt into an open door for people standing exactly where she once stood. A wound stops bleeding on the day we turn it into something that can help someone else. If this story touched you, we hope you'll subscribe to our channel, leave a like, and share it with someone you believe needs to hear it, so that every day we can come together for more stories worth hearing. How do you feel about Camila? And have you ever met someone in your own life who was misjudged simply because of how they looked? Please leave a comment and tell us your story. We truly want to hear the feelings that come from deep within your heart. May you and your family always enjoy good health, happiness, and peace every day. Goodbye for now, and we'll see you again in the next video.